The crystalline archways of the hegemonic conclave chamber refracted the sickly violet light of the distant primary star, casting long, distorted shadows across the obsidian floor, a floor polished by millennia of supplicating forms. Silence, thick and suffocating as the vacuum between galaxies, pressed down upon the assembled dignitaries of the Cathar ascendancy. Before the central dais, where the Prime Arbiter's spectral form pulsed with anxious luminescence, the air itself seemed brittle with unresolved conflict. Sensors monitored the void beyond the outermost barrier, a fragile, hastily erected quarantine perimeter, tracking the minuscule signature of the singular vessel that had breached their controlled domain. It was not the magnitude of the incursion that caused the tremor in the Ascendancy's meticulously ordered society, but its utter, baffling insignificance. One ship, one solitary point of kinetic defiance against the sprawling, immutable architecture of Cathar Dominion, moving with an unwavering, almost insulting straightness toward the heart of their political nexus. The projections remain consistent, hissed the voice of the Strategos, a being whose genetic lineage stretched back to the Great Unification Wars, his chitinous plating clicking softly as he shifted his weight upon the pressure-sensitive plinth. The vessel utilizes propulsion physics we cataloged as theoretical, if not entirely impossible, 3 cycles ago. Its energy profile is minimal, almost negligible, yet its velocity is absolute. It displays no hesitation, no attempts at defensive maneuvering, no protocol adherence whatsoever. The Strategos paused, his multifaceted eyes focusing on the holographic schematic shimmering above the central well. A schematic showing the lone intruder, designated Sol 3 Approach Vessel 1, as an irritatingly bright, barely visible speck poised against the cosmic canvas. It is either an act of unimaginable hubris, or an attempt so deeply flawed in its understanding of our might that it borders on the absurd. The Prime Arbiter, whose essence was a complex interplay of light and modulated gravitational fields, resonated slowly. Absurdity is the domain of the primitive Strategos. We have cataloged the species originating from the third orb of the Sol system, the humans. Their historical records, gleaned from their short-lived electromagnetic broadcasts, suggest a capacity for irrational violence, but their technological index remains profoundly low. They are a species defined by internal, self-inflicted attrition. Why would such an entity suddenly possess the means or the audacity to breach the first halo? The Arbiter's light flickered, indicating deep unease beneath the calculated calm of his station. We have prepared the null field deployment, have we not? If they cross the threshold of the immediate gravitational sphere, the field will reduce their vessel to constituent atoms. We have prepared it, Arbiter, confirmed the Chancellor of Diplomatic Protocol, a species known for their smooth, almost liquid physiology who seem to flow rather than stand. But the analysis of their initial approach vectors raises deep philosophical difficulties. They are not demanding audience. They are not issuing threats. They are simply coming. It suggests a mindset entirely alien to structured interaction. They do not negotiate with threats. They ignore them until they are physically present. If we activate the null field preemptively, we validate their potential threat assessment, thereby justifying whatever suicidal countermeasures they might possess. If we allow them entry into the immediate proximity, we risk exposure of key strategic assets to unknown vectors. The Chancellor's voice was a low, melodic current, weaving doubt into the hegemony's solid conviction. They are an anomaly, Arbiter. And anomalies, by their very definition, defy prediction, which is the bedrock of Cathar security. The chamber filled with the almost inaudible whispers of various sector governors, their concerns mingling into a pervasive static of anxiety. The Cathar ascendancy had ruled this quadrant of the galaxy for 10,000 standard years, their laws absolute, their understanding of physics and biology comprehensive. Humanity, these noisy, short-lived bipeds from a minor arm of a secondary spiral, represented the first genuine systemic uncertainty in millennia. They were the dirt that clung stubbornly to the sole of an otherwise pristine boot. Their psychological profiles indicate rampant emotional volatility, stated the chief xenopsychologist, her voice sharp and clinical. High propensity for self-sacrifice, low regard for their own continuity when faced with perceived ideological opposition. They categorize themselves not by species unity, but by fleeting, arbitrary internal divisions, faith, territory, manufactured history. They are masters of internal contradiction. Such a species should never possess FTL capability, let alone the sustained energy signatures required for a direct transit into our core system. Yet they are here. The xenopsychologist brought up a secondary projection, a complex, almost chaotic web of human neurological activity captured from residual data bursts. Observe the variance. Their thought processes are not linear. They are recursive, cyclical, driven by motivations we categorize as entirely irrational. Honor, vengeance, love. These concepts do not generate superior engineering. Strategos leaned closer to the display, his mandibles working almost imperceptibly. Perhaps this is the flaw. They are so consumed by these internal, chaotic struggles that they fail to recognize the mathematical certainty of their own obliteration. They are sending a sacrifice, a test probe built upon the ashes of their prior failures, hoping 1 in 1,000 such attempts might succeed. He projected a visual representation of the human vessel, a dull, angular object, utterly lacking in the graceful hydrodynamic shaping favored by civilized species. It was functional, brute force construction. It looks like a weapon forged by beings who fear the universe more than they understand it. The Arbiter absorbed the data streams, the collective fear of his council a palpable pressure against his non-corporeal form. Fear is instructive, strategos, but fear cannot paralyze the ascendancy. We are built on order. We must apply order to this intrusion. We will permit the vessel to reach the orbital boundary markers of the G-sector stations. No closer. If they attempt to deviate, the null field deployment is authorized immediately. We will not allow them to contaminate our political sphere with their disorder. A wave of collective relief, subtle but present, washed through the chamber. The Cathar understood warfare as a series of calculated attrition models. They had established the rules of engagement millennia ago. The wait was agonizing, marked only by the soft hum of the chamber's environmental regulators and the rhythmic, infinitesimal updates from the distant sensors. Hours passed in the hegemonic temporal measurement, which stretched awareness to a languid crawl. The human vessel continued its relentless approach, a single, stubborn spark against the infinite dark. Then the shift occurred. Not a dramatic explosion, not a sudden acceleration, but a subtle recalibration of energy output. The vessel was slowing. "It is decelerating," the strategos reported, his tone shifting from aggressive caution to bewildered concern. Deceleration vectors are mathematically impossible given its reported mass and propulsion signature. It is violating established laws of momentum conservation. The Chancellor's liquid form rippled. Are the sensors compromised? Is this a form of cloaking technology intended to mimic structural failure? Negative, Chancellor. The deceleration is genuine. It is executing a perfect orbital capture maneuver around the outermost fringe of the primary gravity well, a maneuver requiring precise, multi-dimensional gravitational calculation that surpasses the capabilities of even our most advanced automated docking systems. The xenopsychologist interjected, a tremor in her usually flat analysis. Arbiter, they are not acting irrationally. They are acting with a cold, precise logic we have failed to map because we were looking for their technology, not their inherent capabilities. The holographic display sharpened, resolving the single vessel into clearer detail. It was stark, functional, devoid of cultural ornamentation, a tool. As it settled into a perfectly stable, highly efficient high orbit, a new signature emerged from the ship's hull. It was not a transmission of threat, nor a declaration of demand, but a carefully modulated burst of electromagnetic data, targeted precisely at the hegemony's central communication nexus. "They are attempting communication," the Arbiter stated, his luminous form pulsing rapidly as he absorbed the incoming data packet. The sheer volume of information transmitted in those few seconds was staggering, yet it was not noise. It was structure. The hegemony's best linguistic analysts worked frantically, breaking down the alien structure. What they found was not language, but mathematics, pure, universal constants rendered into a framework designed for instantaneous comprehension by any entity capable of complex theoretical physics. It was a universal primer, followed by a complete, unencrypted schematics dump of their primary propulsion drive, and then a detailed psychological analysis of the Cathar Ascendancy's sociopolitical structure, complete with documented instances of internal dissent dating back millennia. The silence in the conclave was now absolute, heavier than before. The strategos' plating seemed locked in place. The Chancellor's surface tension wavered, threatening to spill over the edges of his platform. "They have mapped us," the Arbiter Fina. Ellie articulated, the realization a cold weight settling upon his essence. They have not merely arrived. They have surveyed, analyzed, and cataloged our entirety, utilizing tools we believed incapable of such depth. This is not the arrival of primitives. This is the reconnaissance of a predator who chooses to announce its presence only after it has fully understood the prey's internal weaknesses. The communication continued, now shifting from data packets to synthesized language, perfectly modulated to resonate with the Cathar neurological structure. A feat of linguistic engineering that required an understanding of Cathar neurobiology far superior to their own surface-level medical knowledge. A single, clear voice filled the void, utterly devoid of inflection, yet carrying the weight of absolute authority. We are the representatives of the Unified Terran Directorate. We offer an immediate cessation of all preemptive hostile posturing from your side. We acknowledge the strategic importance of this system. We require 5 terrestrial standard hours of secure, localized access to your centralized resource repository for informational exchange. This is not a negotiation. It is a transaction proposed under conditions of mutually assured transparency. Any deviation from this protocol will be interpreted as an initiation of conflict, and we will respond with measures calculated to neutralize the threat to our continuation. The Arbiter recoiled, his light dimming dramatically. The concept of mutually assured transparency from a species whose initial signals suggested chaotic irrationality was a contradiction so profound it threatened the foundational axioms of Cathar diplomacy. "They threaten us," sputtered a minor governor, trembling visibly, "with measures they have not even shown us, based on capabilities we cannot discern." "No," the Arbiter corrected, his voice regaining a semblance of its authority, though strained. "They are not threatening us with action. They are informing us of an already established equilibrium. They have presented us with their complete capability profile, their mathematics, their comprehension of our own politics, as proof of their power before we have seen their weapons. They are saying, we know precisely what you are, and we know precisely what we can do to you should you misinterpret our motives." Strategos, recovering from the shock of the perfect orbital insertion, finally spoke, his voice a harsh rasp. "Arbiter, we must engage. This level of intrusion into our political and technical sphere is intolerable. We must deploy the dreadnought contingent from Sector Gamma. We must demonstrate the cost of such familiarity." "And what is the cost, Strategos, as calculated by the Terran Directorate?" the Arbiter countered sharply. "They have already factored in the deployment of the Gamma contingent in their initial data dump. They anticipate this response. Their analysis suggests that even a localized engagement with a single Cathar capital vessel would result in a tactical victory for them, leading to a strategic stalemate that would cost us planetary infrastructure. They did not calculate their potential defense. They calculated our inevitable offense and the ensuing wreckage." The Chancellor flowed forward, his form now coalescing into a shape of tense contemplation. "Arbiter, Strategos, perhaps we are applying the wrong framework. We view them through the lens of conquest and subjugation. But what if their interaction is entirely predicated on a different value system? What if they seek not dominion but parity? The request is specific, informational exchange. They are offering knowledge in return for access. They are treating us not as subjects, but as colleagues in a vast, complex system. Colleagues who arrive with blueprints of our internal security flaws." Strategos spat the words out. "Colleagues who arrive with a functional drive that dismisses the standard physics of expansion," the Arbiter mused. "We have spent millennia seeking the next stage of existence, the key to transcending dimensional barriers. They have arrived, unannounced with the key in hand, presented as a bargaining chip. If we destroy them, we destroy the key, and we remain in the dark." The decision was agonizing. The political structures of the ascendancy demanded immediate, overwhelming reprisal against perceived insult or intrusion. To treat with this unknown quantity was an admission of weakness that could fracture the fragile cohesion of the hegemony's constituent worlds. Yet the data presented was irrefutable in its precision. They were dealing not with brutes who fought with fire, but with architects who engineered reality. "We will grant the localized access," the Arbiter declared, the decision echoing with finality. "But this is not diplomacy, this is strategic triage. We will allow the single vessel to dock at the isolated research platform Epsilon 9. A delegation of 3 will meet T. Strategos, you will lead the delegation. You will analyze their weaponry in person. Chancellor, you will manage the exchange. Maintain absolute lockdown on all core data centers. If they attempt to access anything beyond the agreed-upon repository, the platform is purged. This is our final concession to uncertainty." The strategos nodded curtly, the movement stiff with barely concealed rage. "I will see the nature of the violence they propose, Arbiter, and I will measure the audacity of the man or being who pilots such a construct." The human vessel, maintaining its impossible stability, moved slowly toward the designated platform. It docked with a precision that suggested preordained integration rather than mechanical interface. When the docking clamps engaged, the Cathar received a final, single transmission from the human ship, a confirmation code, followed by the activation of a localized atmospheric cycling sequence around the boarding ramp. The hegemony held its breath. They were expecting towering monstrosities, beings armored in exotic metals, perhaps emitting lethal radiation, entities sculpted by millennia of ruthless, aggressive evolution. The ramp lowered, hissing softly as it met the platform floor, releasing a faint, sterile scent of ozone and something metallic, something strangely organic yet disciplined. Emerging into the violet, artificially lit docking bay were three figures. They were bipedal, upright, covered in functional, matte gray environmental suits that offered no aesthetic appeal, only utility. They were average in height by Cathar standards, perhaps slightly shorter, but their posture was unnerving. They moved not with the cautious flexibility of explorers, but with the rigid, measured economy of soldiers who knew the exact tolerances of their own environment. The lead figure raised a hand, not in greeting, but in a gesture that appeared to be indicating the atmosphere pressure seals were secure. As they stepped onto the Cathar platform, the hegemony's environmental dampeners registered their suit integrity. Flawless, built to withstand pressures and temperatures far exceeding the standard operational parameters of this sector. The strategos stepped forward, his multifaceted eyes attempting to penetrate the visor of the lead human. He did not utilize translators. He waited, relying on the hegemony's universal language analysis system to process the expected output. The human leader spoke. The voice that emerged from the suit's external speakers was deep, resonant, and carried the same unsettlingly calm modulation as the prior transmission. "We are here for the exchange. My designation is Commander Rorik. We require access to your centralized historical and astrophysical data archives. We will provide our contributions in return. We will require sterile environment containment for the duration of the transaction. Our biological requirements differ significantly from local norms." Rorik showed no awe, no fear, no eagerness. He simply stated the terms of the agreement, as if confirming a scheduled delivery. The strategos, whose species had once conquered entire star systems by manipulating the very fabric of gravitational torsion, found himself momentarily speechless. He was prepared for threats, for arrogance, for pleas for mercy. He was not prepared for efficient bureaucracy conducted at the edge of the galaxy. "Commander Rorik," the strategos finally managed, his voice laced with an aggression he could not quite suppress. "You have violated sovereign space. You have deployed technology that defies established physical constants. You have offered no explanation for your arrival, save a transactional demand. Explain the nature of your intent. What war is so pressing that you force the hegemony to parley with a single scout vessel?" Commander Rorik did not react to the implied threat. He turned his head slightly, as if consulting an internal readout. "Intent is a subjective metric, strategos. Our intent is continuation. As to the technology you find anomalous, it is merely an application of advanced wave mechanics understood by our civilization for several standard centuries. As for war, we are not currently at war with the Cathar ascendancy. We are here because of a far more significant entity, one which your own archives suggest you have observed, though perhaps failed to accurately classify." Rorik paused, and the other two humans remained perfectly still behind him, their hands resting near subtle, non-obvious integrated components on their belts. "We are here regarding the extinction event signal." The strategos froze. The extinction event signal. A theoretical construct, a dataset buried deep within the most protected historical files, a remnant of a catastrophic event predating the Cathar ascendancy itself, dismissed by most scholars as mythological noise. A recurring, cyclical energy signature that appeared across the oldest, deepest strata of galactic radiation M. Apping, always preceding systemic collapse in any star cluster it touched. "That signal is folklore," the strategos dismissed, attempting to regain control of the narrative. "It is a transmission of complex, highly organized dark matter manipulation," Rorik countered immediately, his voice flat. "It is a beacon, designed to harvest civilizations once they reach a certain threshold of energy expenditure, collapsing their local reality into a localized singularity. Your scientists labeled it noise because the scale of the engineering required to generate such a signal was beyond your immediate comprehension. Our civilization identified it as a primary existential threat roughly 3 centuries ago, and we have spent that time preparing to meet it." Rorik gestured toward the data port that had extended silently from the platform to interface with his suit. "We are not here to conquer you, strategos. We are here because you are now standing in the blast radius of a threat you failed to recognize. We require your comprehensive sensor data on the gravitational distortions in the uncharted void to refine our trajectory prediction. In exchange, we offer the operational schematics for the primary countermeasures we have developed, weapons capable of forcing a localized reversal of the dark matter harvest field, weapons capable of killing what you might inaccurately term a god." The emotional gravity in the chamber shifted violently. The political posturing, the fear of territorial insult, evaporated, replaced by the stark, cold terror of cosmological obliteration. The Cathar had feared internal rebellion, external invasion by conventional means. They had never truly budgeted for the possibility that the universe itself was a timed mechanism designed for their eventual termination. The Prime Arbiter's light pulsed with an urgency that bordered on panic. "You claim to possess the means to combat the extinction signal." "We do," Rorik confirmed. "We have spent the last century building them. We call them judgment devices. They require immense, focused energy singularity containment. We can teach you how to build them within 5 standard Cathar cycles, provided you offer unfettered data access immediately." The internal conflict within the hegemony was devastating. To accept this help meant admitting profound, systemic failure, both technological and philosophical. It meant admitting that the species they had patronized as primitives possessed a clarity of vision that they, the ancient masters of this quadrant, lacked entirely. The Chancellor spoke, his voice laced with sudden, fierce curiosity, overriding his ingrained diplomatic caution. "Commander Rorik, your methodology suggests an immense degree of focus and centralization of effort. How did your species manage to unify its entire societal purpose onto a single existential threat, given the inherent volatility you observed in our psychological profiles?" Rorik turned, addressing the Chancellor directly, the visor obscuring any expression, yet the tone conveyed a weary resignation. "We did not unify immediately. We nearly annihilated ourselves first. We learned efficiency through catastrophe. Our defining principle, Chancellor, is not irrationality, but lethality. When facing an enemy that requires absolute, unflinching dedication to overcome, all other concerns become irrelevant. We built weapons to kill gods because we understood that if we did not, the gods, or whatever mechanism governs ultimate destruction, would eventually come for us all. Our internal conflicts dissolved when the true scale of the threat was quantified. It is not hubris, it is survival logic. We learned that the most effective political tool is the unambiguous definition of an external enemy so vast it renders internal squabbling pointless. The strategos finally stepped forward, shedding his anger for a razor-sharp, purely military focus. He bypassed diplomacy entirely, addressing Rorik as a peer in the calculus of conflict. "The judgment devices describe the energy matrix required for a successful deployment against a confirmed Class V extinction beacon signature. Be precise. Do not utilize metaphor or political framing." Rorik nodded, a minuscule movement perhaps, but acknowledged by the strategos as a sign of engagement. "The requirement is a stable, contained quantum singularity, oscillating at a specific frequency relative to the background gravitational constant of the target system. We require materials science data on your exotic matter containment fields to adapt the device structure. Your current confinement technology, while robust for localized stellar mass manipulation, is insufficient for singularity oscillation. Our own containments are integrated directly into the operational chassis of our vessel, utilizing molecular weave patterning derived from captured fragments of the signal's residue. We can reverse engineer the necessary patterning for integration into Cathar. Architecture, but only if we can see the underlying lattice structure of your current confinement alloys." This was the revelation. The humans were not just offering a design, they were offering a technological bridge built on understanding the enemy's defenses, the signals, by reverse engineering its influence on Cathar infrastructure. They possessed knowledge of the threat that surpassed the hegemony's own understanding of its existence. The Prime Arbiter made his decision instantly, overriding any lingering political objection. The threat of the signal was the only variable that mattered now. "The data will be provided," the Arbiter boomed, the violet light strengthening until it felt almost incandescent. "Strategos, Chancellor, you will oversee the physical interface. Commander Rorik, you will be given access to the Epsilon 9 repository under the protection of the Shadow Guard contingent. You will present the countermeasure schematics within one local rotation. We will begin the construction simulations immediately." Commander Rorik gave a fractional inclination of his head. "Understood, Arbiter. We appreciate your swift acceptance of reality. Efficiency in the face of annihilation is the highest form of intelligence." The exchange began immediately. The Cathar initiated the secure transfer of their deep-scan astronomical data, a vast torrent of knowledge accumulated over 10 millennia. In return, the small, functional human vessel pulsed, and an even vaster torrent of technical schematics flooded the hegemony systems, complex diagrams detailing energy manipulation far beyond Cathar mastery, alongside the terrifyingly beautiful mathematics underpinning the judgment devices. As the initial data transfer reached its peak, the Strategos, accompanied by a detachment of his most elite, heavily armed infantry, beings encased in layered, energy-dampening armor, escorted Commander Rorik and his two silent companions toward the primary data transfer hub within the platform. The tension remained palpable, a counterpoint to the furious intellectual activity engulfing the hegemony's networks. The Cathar feared the sudden, surgical violence they knew the humans were capable of unleashing should the terms be violated. As they walked through the sterile corridors of the research station, the Strategos finally managed to press Rorik on the nature of the human civilization that had produced such focused capacity. "Commander," the Strategos growled, his voice heavy with the weight of history, "your species presents a profound paradox. You speak of unified survival, yet your historical transmissions suggest constant, debilitating internal conflict. You eradicated large portions of your own population through ideological disputes as recently as the baseline century. How does a species so predisposed to self-destruction achieve the focus required to build weapons against cosmological entities?" Rorik stopped walking, his two subordinates instantly flanking him in a tight defensive posture, their stillness radiating controlled readiness. He looked directly at the Strategos, and for the first time the Strategos sensed something beyond simple professionalism emanating from the visor, a deep, almost genetic weariness. "Strategos, you observe our history and see chaos. We observe it and see the necessary crucible. We fought constantly because we were fighting over localized, irrelevant variables, resources, borders, philosophical definitions of the supreme being. Every internal conflict, every horrific war, refined our ability to define the ultimate enemy. Each atrocity, each tactical failure was logged, analyzed, and utilized to hone the species' collective survival instincts." Rorik leaned slightly forward, an unnervingly intimate gesture in the sterile corridor. "We did not unify because we suddenly agreed on governance or belief. We unified because we reached a critical mass of mutually assured destruction amongst ourselves. We built weapons capable of ending our own species multiple times over before we ever looked outward. That internal horror taught us a singular, non-negotiable lesson. If you possess the capacity to destroy yourself, you must dedicate an equivalent, if not greater, capacity to prevent that self-destruction. The shift came when the primary operational doctrine changed from "how do we defeat our neighbor?" to "how do we survive the universe?" The weapons we show you now are the inevitable result of a civilization that stared into the void of its own making and decided, collectively, that it preferred to look outward instead. The Strategos found this explanation chillingly logical. The Cathar had avoided self-destruction through careful, rigid control and hierarchical structure. The humans had achieved it through self-inflicted trauma that forced radical adaptation. They reached the hub. It was a vast, shielded chamber housing the core data matrix, glowing faintly with the captured light of 1000D. Eid stars, the Cathar historical record. Rorik's team deployed their connection array, small, matte black devices that slotted seamlessly into the hegemony interface ports. "We begin," Rorik stated. "The first phase requires the full astronomical data set. We need gravitational distortions extending back at least 5,000 standard cycles, focusing on any anomalies that do not correlate with known stellar formation or black hole activity. The transfer began. It was a river of light flowing from the Cathar archives into the small, seemingly fragile human interfaces. The Cathar delegation watched, waiting for the inevitable moment of betrayal, the hidden Trojan horse within the data. Hours bled away. The exchange continued with relentless efficiency. The humans offered the framework for the judgment devices, vast energy equations that made Cathar power generation seem like flickering candlelight. They explained the physics of controlled singularity manipulation not as theoretical possibility, but as standard engineering practice. The strategos, watching the data streams, finally understood the depth of the human capability. Their understanding of physics was not merely advanced. It was fundamentally different, focused on manipulation at the quantum and gravitational level with a casual disregard for stability that suggested absolute mastery over the forces involved. It was during the second phase of the exchange, when the humans were demonstrating the integration schematics for the Cathar industrial base, that the Chancellor noticed the anomaly in the data flow. "Commander Rorik," the Chancellor interjected, his voice regaining its formal diplomatic register. "There is an unusual cross-reference within your provided schematics, a secondary power conduit mapping designated Project Cerberus. This is unrelated to the judgment device deployment. What is its function?" Rorik's team did not flinch. One of the silent humans detached a data chip from their wrist console and inserted it into an auxiliary port, overriding the primary data lock. "Project Cerberus is integral to the judgment device deployment, Chancellor," Rorik replied calmly. "It is the failsafe." "Failsafe against what?" Strategos demanded, his hand instinctively moving toward his sidearm controls. "We are supplying the data necessary for our mutual defense against the signal. What further contingency do you require?" Rorik looked at the strategos, and the weariness in his tone deepened, shifting into something like profound sorrow. "Strategos, we told you that the extinction signal is a harvesting mechanism. It targets systems that reach a critical mass of energy expenditure and complexity, often initiating its collapse sequence when local resistance begins to organize effectively. It is designed to prevent galactic consolidation, to keep advanced civilizations fractured and manageable until the moment of harvest." He paused, allowing the weight of the statement to settle. "We designed the judgment devices to be the ultimate defense against that external threat, but we are also aware, through exhaustive historical modeling, that the single greatest variable of collapse is internal divergence. A highly advanced civilization, once unified against an external threat, will inevitably find a new, self-destructive conflict once the external pressure is removed." Rorik's second, silent companion activated a localized holographic display within the transfer hub. It showed a map of the human Sol system, but not the one the Cathar knew. This map was a complex web of orbital defense platforms, orbital shipyards, and deep space monitoring stations, a level of infrastructure dwarfing anything the Cathar had displayed in their own core systems. "When we finish building the judgment devices with your assistance, the Cathar Ascendancy will possess weapons capable of defeating the signal. We will have saved this entire sector from cosmic annihilation," Rorik stated. "But the moment that threat is gone, we estimate a 94% probability that the inherent factionalism you correctly identified within the Ascendancy will reassert itself. One local power will utilize those weapons to subjugate the others, initiating a new internal cycle of conflict that will, within 3,000 standard cycles, destabilize your core systems and leave you vulnerable again, this time to whatever comes after the signal." The Chancellor was aghast. "You are presuming our cultural destiny. You are judging the future of the hegemony based on our past." "We are applying logic based on observed universal constants regarding centralized power structures in self-aware entities," Rorik corrected. "Project Cerberus is not designed to fight the signal. It is designed to ensure that neither species possesses the capability to achieve total unilateral strategic superiority once the signal threat is neutralized. Cerberus is a network of distributed, non-replicable kinetic dampeners, designed to subtly degrade the efficiency of any single dominant faction's high-energy weapons systems by a calculated margin, enough to maintain regional stability, but not enough to prevent coordinated defense against a true external threat. Rorik stepped back slightly, allowing the gravity of the concept to sink in. We built weapons to kill gods. Then we built a system to ensure that no single faction, human or Cathar, could ever utilize those god-killing weapons to become a god unto themselves. This was the ultimate human logic, a ruthless, ethical framework built not on idealism, but on the cold, hard necessity of preventing the self-corrosion that follows ultimate victory. They had shown the Cathar how to build tools of cosmic war, and immediately shown them the mechanism that would prevent those tools from being turned inward. The strategos stared at the schematics of Cerberus. It was elegant, terrifyingly complex, and undeniably effective. It was the ultimate expression of controlled power, a technological muzzle applied to the mouth of potential tyranny. "You would neutralize your own allies?" the strategos asked, his voice barely a whisper. "We would stabilize the strategic environment to ensure continuation," Rorik corrected gently. "We came here prepared to fight a cosmic war, strategos, but the true challenge for any civilization capable of interstellar travel is not fighting external enemies. It is mastering the urge to destroy itself through internal ascendancy. We are enforcing a mutual, enforced ethical equilibrium. We call it strategic trust erosion." The arbiter, observing the data flow from the conclave, felt the structure of his ancient civilization shudder. This was not diplomacy, this was forced maturity. The humans had weaponized paradox itself. "Commander Rorik," the arbiter's voice echoed across the sealed platform, overriding the local communication. "Your transparency is unprecedented. You offer salvation and limitation in the same breath. We accept the premise of Project Cerberus. The knowledge exchange is now confirmed." The Cathar immediately dedicated massive industrial resources to integrating the judgment device schematics. The process was intense, requiring the repurposing of entire orbital foundries. Commander Rorik and his 2 operatives remained on Epsilon 9, supervising the integration, their calm professionalism never wavering, treating the assembly of existential weaponry with the same methodical attention as they would a routine maintenance check. Within 4 Cathar cycles, the first rudimentary judgment device was assembled, tested remotely against a controlled gravitational anomaly, and proven successful beyond hegemony projections. The Cathar now held the power to fight the signal. As the main fabrication efforts moved into full swing, the strategos spent his time directly observing Rorik, trying to find the seam in the armor, the irrationality that must surely underpin such radical ethics. "Commander," the strategos pressed one day, watching Rorik calmly review schematics for a massive energy conduit that would power the first full-scale deployment site. "You speak of survival logic, of lethal efficiency. Yet you show no aggression, no desire for dominion over us despite possessing the clear technological advantage. Why such restraint? Where is the ambition that drives all superior species?" Rorik looked up from the console, his head tilted slightly. "Ambition to dominate requires endless resources, strategos. The universe is vast, but the energy required to exert absolute control over a significant portion of it is exponentially greater than the energy required simply to ensure one's own continued existence. Dominance is a costly, temporary illusion. Survival is the only sustainable goal." He then pointed to a small, almost insignificant notation in the corner of a containment field diagram. "Observe this alloy specification. It is designed to stabilize the singularity oscillation." "Yes, the exotic metalloid alloy," the strategos confirmed. "Unique to your vessel, correct?" "It is unique to our vessel," Rorik confirmed. "It is the final component required for the physical construction of the judgment device. We synthesized it from raw materials gathered during the transit phase, primarily utilizing high-band cosmic radiation filtering from the region beyond the Perseus arm." The strategos leaned in, recognizing the chemical signature. The energy density required to fabricate a material with that molecular binding strength during transit, it defies reasonable energetic accounting for a single vessel of your size. Rorik allowed a very slight nod. "That is because our vessel is not merely a transport craft, strategos. It is an advanced fabrication platform, utilizing technologies we are not yet ready to share. We were never coming here as supplicants or envoys. We were coming as mechanics bringing the specialized tools required for a complex repair job." "B." The realization struck the strategos with the force of a physical blow. The human ship had not arrived under its own propulsion power throughout the entire journey. It had utilized its internal fabrication capabilities to construct the necessary components as it traveled, adapting to the energy sources encountered en route. Their minimal signature was the result of optimized, on-the-fly construction. But the initial breach. The velocity was absolute, defying our predictive models. If you were fabricating components, you would require deceleration phases, tuning periods. Rorik turned to face the strategos fully, and for the first time the humans seemed to communicate something beyond mere data transfer. A flicker of intensity, cold and pure, emanated from the visor. Strategos, we did not come here to negotiate survival. We came here to initiate a defensive mobilization against an existing threat. We are not diplomats. We are soldiers who learned the hard way that the most effective defense involves precise information transfer and the immediate, logical elimination of self-defeating structures. Rorik looked toward the ceiling, where the vast, unseen structure of the hegemonic conclave was hidden above. You asked what drives us beyond simple survival. I will show you. We survived our own inherent flaws because we understood that the universe does not reward arrogance, only preparedness, and we prepared for the unthinkable. He raised a hand, and instead of accessing a data port, he triggered a direct, unfiltered optical feed from the exterior observation deck of the human vessel, bypassing the Cathar monitoring systems entirely. The image flooded the local display in the hub, bypassing the hegemony's filtered perception of space. It was not the sterile void the Cathar were accustomed to observing. The image revealed a section of space approximately 1 light-year beyond the periphery of the Cathar-controlled sector, a region they believed to be sparsely populated and astronomically unremarkable. But in the display, that region was dominated by a structure of unimaginable scale. It was not a natural phenomenon, nor a traditional megastructure. It was a colossal, interlocking web of dark, non-reflective material, spanning millions of kilometers, absorbing all ambient light, clearly artificial and clearly in motion. It was not a beacon. It was a physical manifestation, a vast, slow-moving edifice that devoured everything in its path, leaving behind only sterilized, gravitationally inert remnants. The extinction signal is not merely a broadcast, Rorik stated, his voice dropping to a near whisper yet carrying perfect auditory clarity. It is the advance element. The web you are observing is the manifestation of the entity that generates the harvesting field. We call them the harvesters. We have been tracking their slow, inexorable expansion for centuries. They do not seek conflict, they seek energy. They consume complexity. Rorik pointed to a specific, massive node on the dark structure. That node is currently processing the energy signature of the Xylos Collective, a civilization roughly equivalent in technological advancement to your own. They were too slow to organize. They debated the ethical implications of building weapons capable of piercing the dark matter field. They are gone. We monitored the final collapse. The strategos felt the cold realization dawn. The Cathar had been arrogant, focused on internal hierarchies, while an ancient, patient devourer was approaching their borders, attracted by the very complexity they celebrated. Commander, the strategos breathed, the millennia of Cathar pride finally dissolving into pure, urgent terror. Why did you not warn us earlier? Why the delay? Why the transaction? Rorik turned back to the console, his fingers moving over the interface, completing the final Cerberus calibration. We needed absolute proof that you understood the scale of the problem, strategos. A mere warning would have been absorbed into your political noise, another irrational data point to be debated and dismissed. We needed to force you to commit your entire industrial base to the solution. You would not have mobilized with such speed for your own survival, but you will for the construction of weapons powerful enough to guarantee your future, provided you believe the threat is immediate and tangible. He finished the calibration. A small indicator light on the human interface turned solid green. The transaction is complete. We have shared the means to defeat the harvesters. We have shared the mechanism to prevent internal tyranny. We have delivered what you needed, packaged in a way you could not dismiss. Rorik looked back at the horrific image of the harvester web. Now we go to war. Cathar industry, human design, unified objective. We have approximately 60 localized cycles before the main mass of the harvester web enters effective tactical range of the G-Sector S. Tations. The silence that followed was not fear. but the charged stillness before a supernova, the final convergence of previously disparate forces into a singular, unimaginable event. The Cathar ascendancy, masters of millennia, had been humbled, educated, and mobilized by a species who had learned everything they knew by barely surviving their own worst impulses. The Arbiter's voice returned, now imbued with a new, sharp clarity, the clarity born of necessary existential clarity. Strategos, Commander Rorik, initiate immediate full-spectrum mobilization. Transfer all key hegemony command personnel to Epsilon 9 for unified command structure deployment. We will build these weapons. We will fight this war. Humanity has presented us with our final examination, and we will not fail it. The alliance, forged in the fires of mutual necessity and predicated on a shared, terrifying technological ceiling, was sealed. The Cathar looked out at the approaching darkness, no longer as rulers of the void, but as desperate participants in a battle they had almost missed entirely, saved only by the murderous, relentless logic of a species who understood that the only way to truly survive was to eliminate the possibility of absolute victory, even for themselves. The cinematic scale of the coming conflict was vast, yet the focus remained sharp. The unwavering gaze of Commander Rorik, the man who had started a war not with an act of aggression, but with a perfect, terrifyingly ethical plan for shared defense.